a lot of buttons to press when you're doing an event, unfortunately, that I just didn't know was part of this. So I apologize for uh, this getting started a little late. It's an interesting situation, is all I gotta say. All right, all right. So now that I've got all that kind of worked out, we're gonna do our best here. So according to this, I've been streaming for 5 some odd minutes, and I think it's telling me now. Um, Suggestion errors can cause incorrect group of picture sizes. Please use a keyframe frequency of 4 seconds or less. So I might cut out here a second while I try to adjust, if I can. Um, I don't think I have any. Nope. I don't really have any way of helping you with that, YouTube. So you're just gonna have to deal with it. I don't know why you're always seemingly able to sort this out when I don't schedule an event. Why scheduling an event now would matter. Well, this seems to be going okay, and I think in general everything looks good. I have chat open, so see if anyone wants to get involved on this one. Right. Looks like that's configured correctly. So to the control room. Well, I don't see anything wrong as far as what looks like the live stream is seeing. I don't see any buffering issues, so we're just going to push forward with this. And hey, if it doesn't go great, um, I apologize. Really, in the end, to give you kind of some background, I was talking with the Phalcon guys after my first video, and there was kind of the discussion that there might be the need for a few more sample training kind of videos, and I thought to myself, I had been excited about the framework, and it might be fun to work on something um, in it. And since I'm a full stack developer by nature, I don't necessarily see the problem of Phalcon as a single thing to build. I see it as a platform for which I can deliver some cool stuff. So I'm going to spin up MAMP for the moment. And then I'm going to do a little bit of, we might circle around a little bit later about switching this over to NGINX, which should be a totally easy process. I know that this, the demo, the tutorial, which I'm going to like kind of leverage off of, requires a certain amount of htaccess configuration for mod rewrite. And my hope is that they should be small enough that I should be able to convert those to an NGINX configuration. Again, so we're trying this out to see kind of like a step one in a process that will be much bigger. And so my hope is that this will inform us as to what's important, what maybe I might struggle with, what other people might struggle with, and what's the best way to start making some of these videos for everybody. Okay, so I got NGINX. No, I've got MySQL and Apache set up. Now, a goal here is not necessarily to rely on a database for the moment. The couple of questions I really want to attempt to cover are: am I able to? So, to give you a little bit more background, I'm a Rails developer by trade and by profession, which means I'm going to be looking at this always through that eye. And in Rails, we have the asset pipeline. So that allows me to deliver my JavaScript and CSS and my images to the browser in kind of like uh, a convenience manner for development. But the big gains happen when you go to production is that they'll then get a asset hash so that you can cache bust your assets much easier between deployments. So that's kind of the direction we're going. So my first goal is to see if I can find a way to use Yarn as my kind of like abstraction for vendorization of my full calendar dependencies, being it's a JavaScript library. I'll pull all that stuff up here in a minute. And we're going to kind of do a boilerplate project, which will have Phalcon set up, which will have a root page, some index page for me to serve the full calendar library from, and then hopefully find a good way of capturing the assets for like a production build, or at least allow me to rely on the assets as they live within the node modules directory. So my goal always with a full stack project is to never actually vendorize any of my additional assets. So say I want to use Bootstrap, say I want to use Materialize, say I want to use Full Calendar or jQuery or whatever. I do not include them in my project. I do not use a CDN that's outside of my control to deliver them. And that's not necessarily something that everyone has to deal with. But for me, most of the projects I end up working on are reasonably large in size, and they end up in an enterprise sense. They're going to want to house the servers and the responsibilities, usually for legal reasons. And that means that I don't care if I'm really being efficient in the web sense. It's more about being able to consistently deliver the same assets and control that delivery whenever possible. Now, I know any of those smart guys out there who's done web development for a while is going to say, well, we can't rely on NPM for production dependency management. I know they keep saying it. I know that they keep advising that. The reality is that that's what everyone's doing. Now, you can always run your own like NPM register or mirror internally, and that way you can make sure that your mirror is up and you have a copy of the files for your deployment structure. I've never had a situation where I've been that big that I haven't been able to just fail to build if NPM is unavailable for a while. And we've never worked in the scene where maybe a day of NPM not being available is effectively the end of the world. So we don't have that problem. Anyways, let's see where we can go. So I'm going to start by grabbing the sample project that I worked in the last video. I've set up my MAMP installation to look at this folder now as my project. Now, the hope is I should just be able to do some CP. I'm on a Mac, of course, so I'm going to do a lot of command line stuff. Okay. So previously, I worked on Phalcon test. And then here we have the tutorial. So my hope is to just maybe do a git export. I can't remember if git export works. No, maybe not. Well, we'll just CP it and delete the .git folder. Phalcon full calendar. Right. Okay. So if you're following along at home, I'm going to set up a new Git, and I'll be pushing to this regularly throughout the video to try to allow you to be able to connect up. Some of the things you'll need installed is you'll need some version of Node. I usually use one provided through NVM. NVM is the Node version manager, so it kind of just lets me have more than one version of Node available at any given time. I currently have installed at any given time many versions of 6, and then I keep some ahead. We were previously working in 5. I was finally able to get all of our projects off of 5. Feeling pretty excited about that one. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, we're going to use anything in version 6 of Node for this project. It really won't matter because we're effectively not using Node as a compilation tool. We're just using it as a way to access NPM. to get access to the packages that we want for convenience. So I can keep this project as effectively small as possible. Phalcon test, and then we're going to do positive in your tutorial. Where am I at? I should just be able to drop this right into here. But I'll need to do that recursively. There we go. So we've done a little bit of screwing around with this by creating a new controller. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I'm also going to get rid of the sign up controller because it's not really going to be useful to me right now, and I don't have any models. So this came from the tutorial project when you're reading through the documentation. Okay, so we'll keep that view. Yeah, and we'll keep this one. All right. So now he's going to drop out the Git directory. Which is possible. It never actually copied because it's a dot file. Yep, that's cool. I think I lost my htaccess files though, possibly. I lost the root htaccess file, so I'll have to go recopy that. One of the things I always forget is that CP by itself does not pick up dot files, which I always found somewhat weird. But I guess not everyone using Linux is a developer. I don't know what I'm saying. That sounds like a complete lie to me. And we'll drop that to dot htaccess. There we go. Okay, now we should have all our bits. It should be no issue for me to go ahead and run this index controller and access our index route from our browser. So let's get a browser up that we can all stare at and see if this is an actual browser. Yeah. And then where that browser might actually live on my computer. I have a suspicion that this window doesn't exist anymore. I'm not going to pretend I'm some kind of expert at OBS. It's brilliant that it's free, but that doesn't mean I'm very good at it. All right. Awesome. Now I run map so that it'll work right on port 80, just for convenience sake, not because that actually matters. So sign up doesn't exist anymore, and of course if I click on it, I should get some kind of useful error that sign up controller doesn't exist, which is true because I deleted it. Let's get rid of that. Let's go right to our hello world. So that's Phalcon set up for the roughest part, where at least I know that I can run it, and therefore I should be able to start including the full calendar IO stuff. So let's look at what that looks like. If you're unfamiliar, fullcalendar.io looks very similar to and almost is kind of a feature parody of Google Calendar. And so one of the really awesome things about it, though, is that it has a plugin to handle an API connection between Google Calendar and its backend. So where this matters is it's really awesome to have Google Calendar, but if you've ever tried to import it into another site, Google doesn't make that extremely useful. There's a lot of CSS that they manage, and it really just looks exactly like what you get when you go to their site, which isn't the prettiest thing in modern standards. And they don't really have a care if we customize it. So full calendar is customizable, and it is source code that will live on your system. So that's awesome. So we're going to use the npm version of this to install full calendar. You can use Bower if you want. I think that the general consensus is that Bower is dead these days. So I wouldn't focus on that. If you have a Bower project, don't feel bad. Just not something we're going to spend a lot of time with. So let's get npm booted up first. So we're in our project, so we'll do npm init, which walks us through this lovely little tutorial. So that's going to be the name of our project. Sure, sounds great. Description, full calendar and Phalcon PHP, uh, sample project. And we're not really worried about this being a npm package, so its entry point doesn't matter. We're not going to be running tests here. We don't have a Git repo yet. The author is me. Just in case. And that sounds great. So now we've inherited a lovely package JSON file, which we can use to start loading in our dependencies. Now, personally, I use Yarn. Yarn is a little bit faster. I like its syntax for being able to add to the dependency a little bit easier. The npm command would be npm or npm I or install, and then we would have our package, which is going to be full calendar, and then save --save. And that's fine and all. And I've memorized this command, so I don't have a problem with it. But realistically, I could also do yarn add full calendar. The benefit of yarn is it'll do the same thing npm does, but then also give me a lock file. If you're not familiar with the lock concept, it means that when you distribute this project, you'll distribute the lock file as a dependency. And the next person on your team or the next person who's contributing to your project will be able to use that as the reference for the specific version you used when you built yours. So sometimes you're dealing with npm by itself. You know which version has been registered in the package.json 340, but for some reason they may have had a slightly different version installed in their computer, or the down channel dependency, the downstream dependency of jQuery that included is fuzzy based on the package configuration of full calendars dependencies. It may need, it's either 2 or 3 for jQuery, and we're going to get jQuery 3, of course, or jQuery, is it 2 hyphen 3? Well, we don't know which specific version, 3.2.1, or we're going to get 3.2.0 or 3.1. This will make sure that the downstream dependencies will all match as well. Okay, awesome. So we have full calendar. Now the tricky part is that we're going to have to relatively access the URL to full calendar based on where our templates are. And so that's really one of the things that I'm excited to see how that works. And I also want to implement a layout. We're going to start with this PHTML concept, but I'm quickly going to move to the documentation to look for how Volt works and how Volt might be better. So layout is going to be the first step, because I want to include the jQuery dependency and the full calendar dependency in the layout of this site. As this application stands, every part of it really is going to deal with full calendar. We might find an opportunity later to abstract that into an application layout and then a calendar sub-controller layout. But I don't want to overcomplicate that yet, and that's definitely a refactor that can be done later. So let's go head over to the documentation to see if we can find anything that stands out. Okay. Ooh, using views. Good search result. I like the way this is going. All right. So the first questions I have coming from other frameworks, my expectation is that somewhere I'll be able to set the layout as a default, or there'll be some automatic default layout which I can rely on. Additionally, I'm going to expect some kind of way for me to invert the injection of dependencies or code from my layout or my template. And what that means is that the layout would be rendered with the particular view inside it, but sometimes I might want to change slightly some part of the parent, a part of that layout through my view. There's usually some kind of content or some way of kind of allowing the lower object to influence the upper object. Not something I need at the moment, but just something I'm going to be looking for. So we have a concept where we don't have a folder structure for it, and it's likely I'm going to have to register the layout somewhere. We'll see how this goes by doing a little bit of testing. We have hierarchical rendering. This uses the default PHP itself as a template engine. Therefore, I assume they're doing this PHTML stuff. Yeah. Okay. This view related to the controller is only shown for every action executed within the controller posts. So that seems that the automatic by naming convention concept is I should be able to create in the views directory a new folder called layouts. I then can call that, I call that, well, what's our controller name? Index. Alright, so I have my index.html file, which happens only to deal with the index controller. Now we just have to see the appropriate syntax. Alright, so let's pop back over to Sublime Text, because I just made a couple of things. So first thing I made was a layouts directory. I have an empty file called index.phml, which should match the controller, and that all lives in the view directory. So makes pretty good sense. I realize now that you can't see my cursor, which is lame. Well, at least you can see the text. Learn as you go, right? Okay. So let's put something arbitrary in our layout just to prove it works. And then we can pop back over to our browser and might resize our browser too. Yeah, good enough. So this is all it's expecting, and then we have to echo this get content. So I'm going to purposefully exclude the echo this get content just for the moment because I want to see if there's an inherited, like it works automatically or not. Okay, so in the presence of the layout, without any way of telling it to continue to process the rest of the child objects, this kind of takes suit, and that's kind of what I expected. So we're going to go ahead and implement this as the way the documentation says, so that we can see the rest of our template, which will be pretty cool. Right, so we need to provide this PHP statement. The naming convention for get content, though, does strike me as very similar to the things I've seen before. And that is the same thing I've been loving about this framework altogether, is it just feels very much like I'm at home. And it does what I expect. So here is with a template included. To prove how that's working, I am going to make a couple of adjustments. As soon as I figure out how to transform the size of this correctly. always my problem with having multiple windows in OBS. There we go. And we're going to do the same thing back here. Right. Go ahead and take care of Sublime and get it lined up again. Nope. Okay. Just get you guys lined up again. Okay. Back and running. Get this browser over here so we can kind of see a couple things at once. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reorder these lines just to prove that it actually matters what's happening here. And now, as we should see, from the previous, it matches exactly. So we're going to use the layout file to include our head and body portion of our page, which is kind of what it should happen. I'm sure that there's probably a partial include process. I'm not going to bother with that right now. As far as do we care about the content loading order? We do, but we don't care about it in the sense where I'm not necessarily going to put things at the beginning of the file. So I don't really care if my JavaScript loads in the head. In fact, formal processes should expect that it would load at the bottom. Now we're going to see how well we're dealing with relative asset location, at least in development. Of course, this is the tricky part, is that this automatically would break in production. So unless we brought the dependencies along with us to production, which is probably not likely, the way that I'm going to deal with that is do a little tiny research and see if I can find some documentation about like an asset pipeline process. So we're gonna get this and see if it works, and then we're gonna try something else. Let's follow the exact dependency chain. So our node modules folder will be at the root of the project. I don't show it by default because I don't want to search inside the node modules folder anyways. So of course I can show you that it's here. And there's our full calendar, jQuery, and moment. I'm going to load them jQuery, moment, and full calendar. Although we'll reference the actual full calendar site just to make sure that I am thinking about that correctly. So let's go to a basic usage example. And it says that we do jQuery, moment, and full calendar. We'll need to include the CSS. So we definitely will include the CSS first. It really doesn't matter. And what we got going on here? Probably do a little copy pasta instead. I'm wasting the time typing. And we'll go ahead and just copy these from the documentation, and then we'll update their paths to meet our needs. But that way I can get this window out of the way. Okay. So we know they're probably going to be in the lib directory, but we'll just double check. So let's check the jQuery stuff first. So inside node modules, inside jQuery, we have not a lib directory, but a dist directory. And we want jQuery.min.js. So we're going to be going a slightly different path. We'll keep this final bit. So we're going to be going one directory, two directories. So we're going to go from here to views to app. Go up a couple directories, and then node modules, then jQuery, then dist, and then that should get us to our file. We're going to do the same thing for moment. Moment will have a minified folder, I believe. And in there, we will pick moment.min. So we can reuse this first portion. And then we'll go to moment. Now, just as a fair warning, always use moment. Don't use moment.js in your node modules. Not the same thing. And then moment.min.js. Excellent. Our full column dependency will be probably just as simple. And then we'll modify our style sheet using the same access. Then we'll debug to make sure that it's actually loading it. We'll debug that with the browser. All right, so we have a dist package again. And so just so you know, in the future, we're going to get along to using this. This is the Google Calendar plugin. It's not loaded by default. We would have to load it after we loaded full calendar, but that's exactly the direction we're going to go once we get this thing set up. So just to let you know, it's already there, and we don't have to include anything else. It is maintained as a plugin for them. Okay, so we're going to do full calendar, and then it's going to go dist. And I guess I don't want to use the minified version. I might change my mind, but not a lot of worries there about dealing with minified versus not. Oh, so Nicolas popped in, and we might set up Volt here in a couple of minutes. So let's see if we get this working, and then we'll switch it over to Volt. That would be a lot of fun. I wouldn't mind that. Okay, we've got to get our relative assets. Node modules, full calendar, dist. Yeah, looks good. So just bring this part along. Should be almost the same. Let's find out. And we'll use the minified CSS, since we're not going to be doing any style changes right now. Cool. So to test this, we're just going to throw this in browser, and we're going to look at the developer console and make sure that we don't get any errors in dealing with which resources we've loaded. And we've got unexpected identifier on in all of our JavaScript. Take a look. Did I type something in wrong? It's possible that dealing with the HT access we're using, we might be affecting everything is going to go to public. So we might have to have node modules live in our public directory. Might make sense. We also might be able to relatively access things from there. So we might just be one level too deep. Go ahead and look at our network tab and see what kind of silliness we're getting. And we'll reload the page once more. Well, to me, it actually looks like it did find all of our assets. So we'll just do a quick exception node modules controller handler class cannot be loaded. So probably going to have to find a way to work around this. So it's expecting that we're following controller syntax with these URLs, even though they are just script tags, which is interesting that the server's handling those that way. So let's see if we can find a solution in that direction. Otherwise, I'm going to be stuck for a little bit. The goal is to do this without having to copy our dependencies into the public directory, unless we're doing a dist process. So let's do this. Take this moment to look up if there's an asset pipeline concept, or what the equivalent would be within this framework. window. We'll go right to the source to start with, and then we'll just do a regular Google search. Phalcon PHP asset pipeline. Asset management. Just what I wanted to see. So in this case, assets are being added as part of the controller. And that's an interesting process. The Volt syntax makes sense. What if I don't want to do this at the controller or the action level? Probably the point. Collection groups resources of the same type. The assets manager implicitly creates two collections. Okay, you can create additional collections to group things. So where is that PHP being defined? Where is the collection being defined is the bigger issue. So my collection being defined in the application, and like in the root of the application here. So this assets collection, so it has to be something that deals with the, you have to have access to the, I guess I could do it there, where I have the new application. That should be this. My assumption is that should represent this in this context. Let's see if we get a little deeper in here. Well, what's the worst going to happen? It'll give me an error. I'm back here. All right, so we'll do application. We're going to the header collection. I don't really need to name it, but let's just do it for the sake of it matches the documentation. Having this work from the control level does make me think of this more in the PHP or the Python Django kind of sense, where kind of almost the controller is its own application, and that so they're kind of more atomic in that way. Also, including the assets at the control level does make me think a little bit WordPress, just as a kind of like an analogy in the way that a particular WordPress action will deal with its own queuing process, which is interesting. Let's go ahead and add at least one of our files to the header collection. We're going to add JS, and that's looking at a JS directory, which I assume is probably local to the project root. Let's see. Nicholas is giving me some advice here in chat. If you don't want to do it in the controller action level, you can do it in initializer. All right, so I was lucky to figure that out on my own. The collection is what you define. So assets equals new manager. So I could use manager instead of, let's see what's going on here. Assets collection, gotcha. Anything that you put in the dependency injection container is also in your view layer using this. All right, well, I think I'm kind of on the right direction after reading that. I don't think my syntax may necessarily be right. But at worst, I will get an error. So assuming that this is coming from the root of the project, that means I should be able to replace the syntax for JS with my node modules directory. Let's go ahead and pop over the layouts. Let's grab just one of the very easy paths for jQuery, something that I can test. Cool. Well, apparently I'm doing the right thing. So not only is this framework lovely and orthogonal, but everyone who works on it's super helpful. So thumbs up to all that. So this will just be accessed via this asset output.js header, we'll call it. It won't really be header, but give it a go. I can totally see where I'd want to do this with Volt, though, going forward, just to maintain scoping and kind of not have to keep opening and closing PHP tags. It's not the end of the world, of course, just to get something to try. I know this is not the header, but one thing at a time. This asset output.js header. Okay, let's see what we get. So recently I realized that there's a Discord plugin for live streaming on YouTube, and that would allow for some synchronous audio, at least in communication to me, which might be better than using YouTube's chat functionality. I find the delay to be a little bit weird. Let's see here. Okay, all good. So switch over to browser and see what we get. Of course, I have too many browser windows open. Don't we always? I only got 17 tabs right now. Let's see. Well, I see what it did there. As far as the source is concerned, that it seemed to insert this. Obviously, I was never as specific by providing a type. Ooh, preview doesn't want to do that, so let's go ahead to here. So jQuery still was trying to route. So assets output.js did give me the string that I passed in, but still didn't seem to bypass the syntax that it's expecting. So it means my assumed location has to be wrong, or that JS has to be inside the public directory once again, because of the way that this htaccess file is written. So it does mean that I could possibly write index slash, which would then use the index controller and pass the rest on, but that would then not have a view. That doesn't seem like the best path. I think that maybe my weakness is that I might want to rewrite this without having to rely on the htaccess files. I don't know if that's possible as of yet, but yeah, definitely anything I send in here is trying to go into the public directory, and there's no real way around it unless I were to write a fuzzy rule to skip it. So as a learning experience, what I've learned is that using their asset manager is exactly the same as if I wrote them. Like effectively, its process is very similar, where it lets me take this string and stick it somewhere. But really, it's just transforming it into a absolute path, giving me some help on producing the script tag or the link tag. But it's not really doing anything to bypass. And of course, that's not really its fault. I mean, I'm already making the assumptions about what accessing this to that server would mean by the time I've gotten here. So let's see what else we can try. I mean, I'm game to put index in front and just see what kind of nightmare I produce for myself. Action node modules was not found on index, right? So I need to find a way to break away from the router syntax. So let's read a little bit further. I could set a prefix on it, and definitely if I was using, let's see if I can get minification and filtering. That's pretty cool. I like it. Well, that's definitely convenient because I'm definitely not going to use gulp at all, ever. So if I don't have to, I'm not gonna. I mean, I might use Webpack in the end. Would be my solution to this problem is Webpack these assets into a bundle and then put the bundle in the public directory. That would be easy enough. But it puts it as two steps, and the whole point is so that when I change a file, I can just reload the page and I don't have to do any other kind of long-term building process. So all right, yeah, cannot put URLs in the chat. I think I'm probably gonna move over to Discord, at least so that some of the help I'm getting might be a little bit more direct. Okay, we're gonna check out an alternate project and see if we can find the piece we're missing. Yep. Hold on. Come on. There you go. There you go. Get the right window. All right. So here's an alternative htaccess file that we can take a look at. Oh, this makes sense. So maybe it is appropriate to just have appropriate exclusions. Okay. You know, I was thinking about the kind of interaction between htaccess, the mod rewrite, and this framework altogether, and part of me said, well, that seems like it's just fixing us into a technology stack. And then I thought about it a little bit more. And I'm going, how wonderful that let the web server deal with stuff that is what it's good at and skip the rest. Yeah, I was never really good personally at writing rewrite rules, and then I moved immediately on to NGINX, where most of it's reverse proxy work. So if you've ever done that, your web server just makes a request to another server, which has already decided how to handle the request. Extremely memory intensive. All right, so I just need to add this first block, it looks like. The rest of it looks the same. It's a little bit different. We'll see if we break something. That's always the fun part. Okay, so mod rewrite on. Let's add a filter to let me pass through static files. And we'll leave this the fuzziness of that alone just for a moment, and if it doesn't work, then we'll fix it. Okay. That's my fault now. Although, right. I don't know if the server will necessarily pick up the htaccess file change in the manner that I have it configured. So let's just restart that for sake of sanity, and I will go ahead into here and modify this so that it's actually looking in the right location. I'm going to believe that I probably need a / in front of this, but let's give it a whirl first. try to make only one change at a time in case we're wrong. No, node modules controller handler class copy load. Okay, so definitely. Oh, I think I put this in the wrong place. Duh. Go ahead and put this somewhere that actually makes sense, like the one that it touches first. Although the one I think that I was looking at did go into the public directory. Well, let's take a pop up and let's look inside the website and see what's on that one. Okay, so now I had it right the first time. I should listen to myself. Well, let's copy the whole thing this time in case there is something that I'm missing, and we'll just add this default care set. It's already there. All right. Go ahead and just rewrite this completely. Oh man, cache busting is now available as a result of this, which is super exciting. I absolutely love having that ability. I don't know how many times I've worked in something that relied on gulp to do all its work, and no one set up the cache busting portion. Spending my time. Okay, so I was kind of thinking about this, right? So no, I'm pretty sure that my server is actually pointing to the root directory of this project. That is why. Yeah. So I was correct to assume that it might be a good idea to stick this one level up, right? Okay. Do 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 do. So I should go back to listening to myself the second time, maybe. I don't know. All right, give that a whirl. I feel good about it. I have faith. Nope. We're gonna do the 80-20 rule on this project. 80% of the work is gonna take 20% of the time. That is definitely the way I'm feeling. Project setup's always exciting. Let's read this again. I have requested this file name, which should have been, which localhost node modules. This rewrite rule is looking for any white space, any numbers. Okay. And anything that's this. Are we excluding? We're not excluding. Oh yeah, we're nodding. Okay. I have to remember which version of regex we're using. Is this start and end? Yeah, it's probably start and end. Okay. Well, because I do know that in the end, this should have just routed directly, like past that value through. Interesting. Oh, debugging htaccess files. See what other thoughts that I might have here. I find it interesting that it seems to be loading full calendar twice. No, it's just my imagination. No, it is actually loading it twice. And I wonder if that's because the first time it failed to make the request. Network, there we go. I don't think it'll try again. So, moment I loaded this one. I find it interesting that it doesn't seem to matter if I have relative paths in my URL, it kind of works the same way, which is interesting. Okay, so what's my next way of stabbing this problem? Because this makes sense. I mean, the only thing I would just try before I would write it off, per se. Any amount of white space slash any numbers slash. Those are first two matchers for a non-greedy. And then in the extension, and then the end. Our extensions are min.js, so that's probably where it is that maybe it's because I'm doing min.js for all these. Saying that, no, let's just try it. It doesn't seem right. But heck, I've been wrong before, right? Do this a little bit more directly. Okay. So those additional dots should have been consumed anyways, but just to make sure, and just for my own sanity, which I think is really interesting. Yeah, it's cool. That doesn't see any relative pathing. I mean, obviously I'm executing this function here, which really does make me think I should walk up from here to get to that file, but I'm really thinking about how the browser is going to make the request. I guess that's really what's different when I use the asset pipeline in Rails, for example, is that um, it's figuring that out later for me and making it really, really easy. So now we go to the next step, which is we say that obviously you can't do it the way you do it normally, and let's find a new solution. Let's see here. Let's read a little bit from chat. So the node modules is in the root of the project. And there's nothing stopping me from putting them in the public directory just to troubleshoot. I don't see anything wrong with that at all. It's just not standard. And I don't really have any way of controlling that. It's more of a Bower configure. That Bower would function better in that sense. I'd have to put my package.json in that file. But let's just copy the files and just try it out for sake of argument. And Nicholas is saying he's never used his assets outside the public directory, which, I've seen this in a lot of PHP frameworks, and I get it. It makes sense. It's because I'm assuming that the asset manager is actually going to, behind the scenes, be making a synchronous copy or be setting up some kind of linking that allows me to keep those external. And then, because really the process during development, we use a high memory intensive process of dealing with, okay, here's all my assets, and then I've given myself a proxy to get to those assets through my internal server. Dealing with production, then production becomes, I do that same process, but I do it once, and then I copy the minified version into the public directory. Because of course Rails has a public directory just the same, with an assets directory that gets created during pre-compilation. That said, there's no reason this has to have a public directory, and for like security reasons, it's a good idea because I can make this folder readable, but the rest of it can be only readable by PHP or Apache, and I can make sure that access these other files for like the sake of security. I could definitely see this as a better pattern in that sense, just because of the way that PHP executes. It won't be shoved up into memory before it starts. Outside of op caching. So let's do that. Let's copy our dependencies into public for the moment, this is definitely a place where I would probably want Webpack, or I'm going to try to write something clever that works along with the asset manager and see if it's a possibility or not. Okay, so let's get a terminal window and get out of my web browser. All right, CP, no modules, nope. And let's recursively do that. I did it as a slash, so I think I do have to undo this. Yep, I did it right. All right, let's see if it's able to figure out the relative location of these now. Yep, that was it. So note to self, something to put on the big board. Either build the root file outside of the public directory. I mean, there's ultimately no reason why it needs a public directory, as far as I can tell. I don't know why there's a schemas folder in here now. I must have accidentally copied something funny, because all it should be in here is this. Yeah, so let's just call that a big old oops. Why I have a copy of my project in subfolder. Sarcastic while that was hard. Okay. Let's go ahead and finish this distribution of responsibility. So let's go ahead and copy the rest out of our layout. And the only problem is this isn't repeatable anymore, which is too bad. But it's fixable. So all I really need to do is I need to be able to add a function to add like JS from absolute path or system path, and then allow that somehow to be known. That's going to be the tricky part, I think. But then I could have a tried and true asset pipeline. At least so that I could have a functional like when I want to minify everything, I can minify everything. It goes into public, and I can do that as part of the deployment cycle. But who knows? Maybe it's not necessary. I think I've inadvertently wasted space. So let's go ahead and do that. So we got jQuery moment, full calendar, and then we just need to add our let's call this full calendar collection. And then we'll create a new collection for the CSS. Do I really care? Not really. Let's just throw it all together. I find it more convenient to just have everything. I don't really care if the style loads at the bottom for now. So back to, let's see, do we have our full calendar documentation up still? Yes, we do. Cool. So everything's looking on the level. And then we'll take another stab at the asset management. So it's called add CSS will be our next call. And then we'll go ahead and make sure that we rename this in our layout and get rid of the rest of this chaff. I really could load this before or after, I don't care. Alright. Back to the old Yep, looking good. Cool. And a double check. Unexpected token in full calendar min CSS. Looking good. So the question is, did I accidentally put something in funny? Let's see. So we got script. I'm pretty sure I did add CSS, but I could be wrong. So did add CSS, but it still created a script tag for it. Embarrassing. Let's go make sure I didn't type something wrong. Okay. Oh, there's a false. Oh, okay. That false might mean something to me. False would probably mean that it would access it. It would load it locally. Local resources are those provided by the same application and are located in the document root of the application. So document root of the application, in my case, is public. URLs in a local location are generated by the URL service, and remote resources are those such as common libraries. Okay, and they are provided by CDC. Okay, so it's not exactly what I was thinking. So why is this showing up as a script tag? Oh, because I'm saying output. So collections are really add CSS. I must be. Let's look at it again. Make sure I just didn't misread it. So I definitely can't mix and match my dependencies within the same collection. I will physically have to make a full calendar JS collection because it seems to take whatever I put in that collection, no matter whether it's CSS or JS, and treats it the same. Truly, it's that big a deal. So this will become full calendar CSS collection, and this will become full calendar JS collection. And in this case, we'll copy this line, do that. Now I've got two collections. So we'll go back to our layout, and we'll put this in the head this time, or above output CSS. Okay, so my observation is right. So it's confusing. So as I'm going through this, I will admit that it is a bit confusing that output.js, if you add CSS or add JS, that's not actually a separate concept. Of course, from the internals guys, that's something they actually do want to put together. So to me, it looks like at first glance that it's just kind of a name alias, but doesn't really have any internal meaning yet. But it will someday, and that's cool. It's really not that hard, and ultimately you're always kind of separating these two concerns to begin with: full calendar JS, full calendar CSS. So I really kind of consider it my own fault for forcing them together. Okay, take a look. Well, that looks right. And now, clever is that. Now, I'm not going to argue that this isn't clever. I added a CSS collection. I put that in my template, and it automatically shoved that into my head. I think that's clever. I like that. It makes me think, though, let's move this above my get content and see if it still ends up rendering at the bottom of the file. Oh, okay. So it seems that the cursory rule is and you know, if you put it above, awfully small to deal with, and I think that's pretty cool. It's possible that adds CSS inside of a JS collection might be a bug. It's worth me taking a stab at and just because if it is a bug, then it gives me a perfectly direct thing to take a look at as I start learning a little bit more about this project. It's really tough, really picking up a new framework. Pardon me. So now that I have this working, and I definitely can see that my code is loaded, it's worthwhile to figure out what would be the optimum way to convert this layout to a Volt file. So let's see if we can get that done. That'd be pretty cool. I'm hoping. So here's my brain says to me, if this was other MVC frameworks that I'm used to, and it was done in this kind of like conventional sense, I should be able to change the extension of the file, and that should be all I need to do. I just need to know what that extension is. Let's see if it's in here. Simple rendering, simple views. Okay, so in addition, this component can leverage a view inheritance available in template engines such as Volt and others. Let's see if they have any more stuff about Volt. Template engines. Additionally, allows you to use other templating engines instead of plain PHP. Or Volt. Well, I don't know why I'd want to. I'm definitely not going to use Blade. I mean, I wouldn't mind using... I'm not going to use Snappy either. It's cute that there's documentation to create my own template engine, though. I want a markdown engine. That's what I want. That would be pretty easy to build. Probably already exists. So we register engines based on... Yeah. Okay. So I was right that it is registered by extension. Let's take a look at what Volt syntax is. Let's see if we can just do duplicate this tab. Phalcon PHP Volt, and get a Volt example. Volt template engine. I'm telling you, whoever's doing the SEO stuff on this site is my best friend. Okay, so Volt has this feeling of almost being like ERB. And so to give you kind of an example what ERB looks like, it's a little bit different. But yeah, let's go to ERB Ruby. Oops, what just happened there? So it's pretty similar. It uses an angle instead of a brace for its syntax. This does strike me though. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about the number of parentheticals I need to use in order to invoke an expression. That always concerns me. So we're going to see what that's like, what the difference between a double is a literal versus something that's just structural code. Partial syntax. It's right there. I knew there was going to be it somewhere. I cannot live my life without partials. So let's see. So this case, it looks like we changed this to .volt, and we're going to convert our syntax away from PHP tags, and we'll assume this is the context already injected. So let's give it a whirl and make sure that this is actually showing up here. Yep. Let's see here. Options, compiled path. So I do physically have to register Volt as part of. So we deal with plugins, I guess, in this manner. Options, compiled path, app, storage, cache, Volt, path of where the templates will be compiled. Okay. That's a relatively large amount of boilerplate. So for sake of just completeness, I'm wondering if registering Volt is in this page. Yeah, so here's our activating Volt section. Similar to what the internal guys are telling me. So I'm just going to compare these two bits. So interestingly, Volt is only a transpilation language. It's not actually itself going to return HTML, which is an interesting thought. So what we're doing is we're abstracting and simplifying the syntax for writing PHP normally. Interesting. Yeah, bulk gives me an easier syntax. Huh. There are a bunch of other templating engines that I've used, but they wouldn't necessarily be compatible. Although I wouldn't be surprised if I couldn't like use Tilt or something like that. Um, I mean, I'd be able to register it, so that's cool. All right, so the register bolt is a template engine, but register bolt is a service. So the difference between that, if I register it as a service, then I'm setting bolt service equal to passing in a view and the injected dependencies from other things, I assume, from the rest of the system. And then we set options. Interesting. So do I need it to be registered as a service in order to register that service as the, that is, it seems to be what I'm actually looking at. Is that in order to register that as an engine, I have to have it available as an injectable service. Okay, so I get it. Sorry, I'm reading a little bit. Just trying to get my mind around this. So I can have it rewrite PHP. So I'm going to show you so you've seen this way. This is the way from the documentation. I'm going to show you the way that I can invoke this, or I can register it as a Lambda function, which is clever. You can tell Volt to snap the file. I'll put /compile file always. Okay. Let's take a look at getting this set up. Okay, so we have a storage concept I haven't used yet, so that's interesting. So, yeah, we have a register engine. So the difference between the two variations here, let's just compare them again real quick, make sure that they're both mostly visible. They are. Um, so where I don't seem to have a asset pipeline for static assets like JavaScript as of yet. Like as of yet, I haven't discovered it. There does appear to be a pre-compilation process for templates, which does actually make a lot of sense. So we write this in Volt. It compiles to regular PHP files, which is nice for at least debugging on the server. I mean, at least it's something that's natural that you can look at. And I have a hard time believing, though, that there's that much of a performance difference uh, in that translation process. I mean, I would agree it's wasteful. There's literally no reason why I should recompile my template on every view. But I do seem to think that it's not a huge concern, or if it is slow, seems like the antithesis to the PHP's like massive strength, which is just basically writing text files. Of course, why waste the resources to begin with? All right, so take a look here. Cloud extension PHP, right? So I'm assuming PHTML itself is probably the same thing because it already is a PHP file. It's still a cute idea. I mean, like it works really well. So in their version, they use new Volt. In this version, we're using PH volt, so I assume that there's some difference between Phalcon volt and traditional volt from the documentation. Well, let's see if we get any errors in regards to this, and if that gives us any feedback about this. So, obviously, I don't have any volt files yet. Okay, so I am getting an error at this point. So it's time to tail our log and see what that would be. Once I remember where I've installed MAMP. Nope. Because I can never remember the path to MAMP. Okay, here's our start page. It really couldn't be any simpler than that, could it? Let's get ourselves a split. And go ahead and re-request this page. All right, PHP notes, use of undefined constraint, constant app path, assumed app path. Okay, so that makes sense. I don't know what app path is, and I've never declared it. So that's absolutely right. Path where my templates will be compiled. So where would my app path be absolute or relative? That's the bigger question. Absolute paths, my biggest enemy. So just to reference back to the documentation, how do they deal with compiled path? So in their case, compiled path is actually relatively defined when you're doing this as a service. So that's interesting. Well, it makes me think that maybe I could just make it relative then. I don't have to make it absolute. Yeah, let's give it a shot. I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is it's going to be wrong. So here, I would definitely need to go up directory, and then I'm not going to put this app. I'm going to keep this in storage. So I don't know if this will create the folder for me automatically. It should create the stuff below it, but let's just have it. All right, compiled extension, all that stuff. Guaranteed I'm going to move this someday, or it's going to go on someone else's computer. All right. All right, next error. Just do that one more time. Undefined variable DI container. It's probably because it's just called DI. Well, let's do a little comparison over here. So over here, I'm not actually being clever about DI. Doesn't seem so. So this context would be what I have as this. DI container is shared views. I think that it's possible that this just needs to be up here. No, I just don't have a defined DI container. That's all. So that means the DI container is probably just DI. What's the worst thing could it be? Wrong? Okay, unkind exception, class phvolt not found in my project. So I'm assuming that that's not registered as part of the extension I compiled, and I might need that as composer. So let's see if just volt works. Class volt is not found. So I'm assuming that volt may be a composer dependency. Oh, yeah, here we go. And I just don't have an alias for it. Oh, that makes sense. I forgot to use it. Yep. Have any other MVCs in here? There, I have an MVC. Right, now I'm all off my rocker. I've just lost it. Okay. Another next error. Let's see what the next error is. Using this when not in an object. Well, that makes sense. So view is a new view. View set shared directories. So I think I already did this once, actually, didn't I, though? So the problem is I'm registering this in the wrong location, I think. Yeah, that's my dumbness. Right. That makes more sense. And then I don't need this anymore because I've already yes, I'm already doing this. Right, I get it. I get it. I don't need to declare a new view because I'm already doing that, and then I just need to bring these options along. Somewhere. So I want to sing that song from Community now, where they Bible goes west or whatever. Whenever I'm feeling like I've lost it, I don't know where I'm going to be next. There we go. That's good. Then that options will be scoped in context to this bit of magic. Okay. Let's see what we get. Next error, undefined variable di. So I think in this context, this stuff di makes sense because I'm inside of a closure and di hasn't been included. So I'd have to use di in order for that to be there. Right, so I'd have to use that, have access to di. Oh, you don't like that even worse, do you? Undefined property of factory default is di. Well, I don't care what you have to say, Mr. Computer. You're not the boss of me. uh, yeah, so we're gonna go back to this di, and oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yep, I'm with you. I'm with you. Getting some help from the outside is always nice. Whoops. Okay. You know, I'm always a little torn about my personal feelings in regards to the PHP 7 closure syntax, and you know, like where I have to define my lexical constraints. All right, there's something still wrong, or it's, so there's no volt file. That shouldn't care. I'm just registering engines. unless it unregisters um, PHTML when I do that. I wouldn't expect that. Well, let's see what happens. Hopefully I'll get an error. Compiled file, no such file or directory, Phalcon full calendar, public index.php on line 82. Nope. Well, let's go look at our storage and see if anything got created. Nothing. Okay, so assuming that what I did was dumb and I broke it, which is probably right. Let's go ahead and create ourselves a Volt file and just make a slight copy. Or the issue is just that I haven't created enough of the directory structure. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to make that. I'm going to go ahead and change that so it automatically creates that stuff. I want to do that. I don't like having to make things. Complaints! Everyone spent a lot of time making something really nice for you, Paul. What are you doing complaining about it? They made it just for me. I'm being a jerk. Alright. Okay. Oh, I actually did get an error on that page finally. It was a little bit on the slower side. Okay. So let's just say um, back over to the Volt documentation. So text should just look like text then in this context. Hi. Let's see. All right, and give preview. All right. So Volt is set up correctly then. All right, let's go ahead and have this do the work we were doing. So I should just be able to say get content now, and I don't know if I will need the. I shouldn't. If it's a simplified syntax, I can probably exclude the semicolons. Let's find out. Macro get context does not exist. Get content does not exist. I disagree. Do I see this anywhere? Am I missing? Oh, am I missing the fact that maybe I don't need deal with function calls? Let's see. I do like the block syntax that's introduced here. That's clever. All right, so get content. I don't know if that accesses it as a property. Already tries to make it a call site. Good question. This part would need to be reworked. Let's just rename this to .volt. And be a little bit more simple about things. All right, undefined variable get content in layouts index. Okay, makes sense. I would assume that it wouldn't know the difference between a call site and a property just by its lonesome. Well, let's not beat around the bush, and let's actually say this get content. Scanning error before this in blah blah blah. Okay, weirdness. So in this case, they have a special macro I see. There's a special macro for content. We exclude the get portion, and it'll just be that. Let's see if that's the case. All right, perfect. Whoopsie doodle. Okay. We provided the content. Now we just need to replace these assets, output class thing. So let's see if there's a quick example of dealing with assets. I need more. So we use dot syntax. It looks like that for property access. So hopefully it should be assets dot output.js. Meh. Seems like we use dots. Nope. Maybe. Yes. Yeah, it looks like it. Well, that makes me happy. That's almost like, so to some extent, that's almost like utterly changing what it is to be PHP and sad. But it is a shorter cursor syntax. Opinion 6 one way, half dozen the other on that. It'll take me 4 seconds to memorize it, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Whoopsie doodle. All right, let's see what we got. Hey, it's just that easy sometimes. Sometimes you read a little code, make a little love. Full calendar tonight. Full calendar tonight. All right, so that should be it. We should get all of our assets now. Yeah, that's looking just right, and no console errors this time. I'm gonna take. Well, that's what happens when you're not trying to load CSS as JavaScript. So bonus. Keep that around for a little bit. We're finally at a stage where this is reasonably useful. So I think I really like being able to see these compiled. So at this point, I probably think I should add a git ignore. And you know what I'm going to do instead? Before I do that, I want to actually reorder this project so that I don't have to have the public directory and my node modules within the public directory. Yeah, that'll be reasonable. Let's initialize a git repo here, just anyways. I'll go back to tail end this, put it up here, because I think I'd be happy if our program entry point just lived in the directory outside of app. I think that'd be very acceptable, especially if storage is going to live out here. Then it seems like it's an okay thing. I don't really need to have a public directory. I mean, I guess for production purposes, I would need a public directory, but well, I guess the point could be is this one lets me redirect to that path, which don't be wrong, then goes and tries to do this, goes into the public directory and looks for it there. I would need to add this again inside the public directory, and then have it look one directory up, I think. Yeah, that's a interesting idea. So would it rewrite the path to the file that it's looking for? I know, I'm just going to keep getting lost on this one. It's no matter what, it's always going to try to run it through the PHP file. Let's call it a task for another day. Yeah, let's call that a task for another day. Okay. Well, Git it is. Let's make this live somewhere. Git init. Cool. Let's add a .gitignore file. Okay. What do I not want to worry about? I want the yarn.block. I want to exclude the node modules folder. I want to exclude public node modules. I really don't want to be pushing node modules up there. I'd almost just put a script in here that copies them. Documentation is fine. The README is fine. Don't need that file at all. I probably say that's enough. Let's see how many files I'm actually having to commit here that I got this correct. All right, package JSON, public schemas. Let's. Am I limiting myself appropriately with public directory? I think so. Okay. Using the evil git add dot, git commit m. As base project with asset management and bolt. Okay. Let's go ahead and snap together a repo for this. Full calendar demo with Phalcon PHP. Smiley face. Because to be honest, I feel very smiley face about everything I've done today. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've gotten some incredible help today, which is the only reason that I'm probably getting to where I'm going just yet. But these tough points are only because of the general way that I put a project together. I think that probably the average person starting out, if you came from a PHP background, this public directory issue would not be something that you would struggle upon. Something that doesn't make sense to me, and I think I've always found a little bit awkward. But it's just kind of goes with the territory, as it were. All right, I don't need to read me, and we'll go ahead run some fancy ass commands. All right. All right. We have our remote set up, and I think I can just drop this in documentation on YouTube right now. Let's see if it'll let me. So awesomely enough, it does let me just directly update the description. So if you happen to reload this page, you will now see the repo link there in case you want to take a look at the overall work. And I accidentally uploaded the storage directory. So let's go ahead and fix that before I get too far. Git rm storage cache. Yeah, Volt I didn't want to delete the whole directory. That's not what I wanted. That's not friendship. That's definitely not friendship. Whatever. Git RM, you failed me once again. For the last time. But you'll likely come back in a movie where you're CG'd in later. So, whatever. If Star Trek, no, not Star Trek. If Star Wars taught me anything, it's that we physically can never die. Like, even Harrison Ford, right? He wanted to be killed off in the film. But now he doesn't even have a choice, right? They could just, he could die in real life and they could just bring him back. In a horrific zombie cartoon character who probably took some of his animation stuff from the Clone Wars. Alright, tirade over. Okay. So what I do want to do, though, is I want to keep these folders around for the next person. So let's do a .getKeep in there. And we'll exclude not storage cache vault .getKeep. No, are you gonna? You're not gonna play along? Oh, I just do this. Oh, it's because I think I need to invert the order. Nope. Nope, I'm just dumb. Alright. And then yeah, it's probably just because I've got this kind of weird order. Whatever. I don't care anymore. It's good enough. We'll just deal with it. I'll just not be pushing stupid stuff into that folder anymore. And I'll probably just update the README in a little bit to make sure that people know they need to create those folders. Okay. Don't care about any of this stuff. Requires Phalcon. So must create directories. Storage, cache, vault. Move node modules into public directory after yarn. Me sorry. Temporary hyphen me sorry. Okay, so that's enough for that. And one extra line here. Go ahead, update the README. Okay, so our fancy repo Yep, we don't have any dumb stuff. Our README has something useful in it. I am stoked. Now, finally, after all of that, we can finally put a calendar on a page. That is very exciting. I mean, it may not necessarily seem very exciting, but it's actually super duper exciting. Like, this is what I've been waiting for. So, back to our full calendar documentation for basic usage. Um, full calendar is capable of basically just injecting itself on any page. So, boilerplate aside, things set up aside, our project now is a thing, and we should all be very proud of ourselves. We don't need this in our index file, especially since it's a Volt. We have our template for our assets. Now this is as simple as adding one more JavaScript file internal to our project this time, and then giving us one element on the page. So it doesn't appear that Volt gives us a shorthand for HTML. It's in fact exactly the opposite. We use traditional HTML in here, which is nice. So for us, we're going to make a div whose ID is calendar. Make sure that I'm not too far on the screen. Okay, so we make a div whose ID is calendar within our view. And we don't need to provide any content. This is really just a placeholder as an entry point for full calendar's implementation. Let's create ourselves our new JavaScript file. So now the thing that I've learned as a result of adding JavaScript to the project is it seems that at least the way that I'm following the assets collection is that they only work if they're relative to the public directory. So, and that's because of this whole htaccess thing. So for us right now, we're going to create this folder, the JS folder, inside of the public directory, just to save us from any other like nuances that my brain keeps trying to direct us to. So this will be our full calendar implementation. Full calendar implementation. Sounds good. Obviously the JavaScript here for this is really easy. So we're going to do just regular jQuery selector. And they want me to use document.ready, but I am a modern person who uses nested functions so that this can at least be a closure. And then because I'm also kind of anal about making sure that I have control over my jQuery variable, I'm probably also going to create a function that creates $, and then I'm going to pass it jQuery, which means I'm missing a set of parentheticals. All right, so there's my closure. One of the things that Rails does that I think is really clever is that its asset pipeline also automatically takes so it's using a technique called sprockets. And sprockets, the underlying technology, might be something that's even compatible here. I just don't know yet. But what it lets you do is just write JavaScript within the file, and it automatically wraps it in a closure, which I think is just a really clever idea. Now, just for my own sake, this just makes sure that I don't accidentally redefine one of my dependencies to this and then screw everything up. As I usually would follow the rule that we never use $. We only ever use jQuery, but this lets me redefine that so I can maintain this shorthand, but not break my own rules. Now there are options for callbacks and things like that when dealing with full calendar, and like any other jQuery based, like anything that registers itself as a jQuery plugin, which full calendar does, that we're going to pass in those options at initialization, and those can be a little bit clunky. But this is sometimes the case where like module syntax, like a module library, would be useful, because then we could wrap some of the bigger, deeper functions around these events into their own modules. not really that worried about it. There are plenty of options. There are plenty of really important things. And right now, we're just going to pass it an empty configuration object. Uh, my habit is to not use semicolons. 99% of the time, I'm using Webpack or some other Babel transpilation. I mean, like, heck, I'm probably doing this in Chrome, and I could probably write all these as arrow functions. And I might just do that for fun. Okay, we got full calendar implementation inside public.js. So let's go ahead and include that. Oh, at this point, I'd say we'd include that in our controller, but I don't want to start adding more changes just yet. So it's going to be JS full calendar implementation. Okay, let's double check the page and see that that all came through as expected. Hello, Mr. Browser. Well, I can tell you right there that it already works. So, very cool. I'm quite pleased with actually the way that came together. Um, and so it is really about this public directory, which I'm gonna might kind of fight a little bit later. Ooh. So I've just learned that I don't have to be as well. I can chain these together. I mean, that's not really the end of the world. I really feel that that might be a train wreck, possibly. Let's find out. Let's see how that feels when I chain these. Oops, nope. I want to keep that first one. Oh, everything's returning this. Learning all kinds of stuff. But if I do this, then my arrow is going to be so far over there. Oh, I can't do that. I have to do this so I can maintain at least some kind of semblance of where my arrows are going to be. Line them up because I'm neurotic. Yeah, apologies to all the observers, but I'm neurotic. Okay, how do I feel about this? I hate that. I kind of hate that. Do I hate that? Assuming the collection returns the thing I expect, I think is the thing that probably I don't like. But um, I don't really know if I'm saving myself anything really intense here by doing that. I mean, it almost makes me say like, then what's the point of this? Now I feel a little bit better. Now I can line up my arrows a little bit. Oh, now I like it. And this is me, pedantic, useless person who only cares about lining up the stupid arrows. And while I'm having this conversation with myself, Nicholas is out there basically telling me the same thing. uh, well, that that is the thing I can live with. I guess I don't need this application thing. I don't know if I need this part or not. I'm not 100% sure. Thank you, someone else who respects my OCD needs in making sure that the code is not only functional but also beautiful. Okay, so which do I like better? This returns the same object. Yep, I'm gonna go with that as that's a meaningful way for me to think about this. Because I define a collection, then I add a bunch of JavaScript to it. Okay, cool. Let's make sure I didn't break anything. Didn't break anything. Very cool. All right. So I think the next thing to think about is I guess they're planning out routes for these next events. Let's see how long we've been running at this. So we're going on 2 hours at this point. I think that this is an okay stopping point. Um, let's just take the time to look over the documentation for full calendar. I'll go ahead and finish pushing this, and um, we'll kind of like pick this up either in the middle of this week or next week, and start with the actual implementation part. But we have a functional project that does the things that we expect now. Ooh, that's the thing I want. That's what I. This is where my. Uh, okay. This is where my happiness will come from. Yeah. Then I can just do this. Then I win at all the things. Just so you know, this is what it feels like to win. Every time you get to make the code smaller, it's called winning. Charlie Sheen back in the day talked about winning for a while. He had no idea what winning was. This is winning. Also screwing up everyone's spaces, but that's because I use spaces. Yeah. So in this file, the di get is the same as an alias for basically just using the property notation. So even smaller. I like that. I like that. I don't even know if I need the white space here. I feel like this really doesn't run together that poorly. Yes. Sold. Sold. And now my page isn't working because I broke something. Fantastic. What did I break? And do over. I deleted the line I needed. Yeah. I just need to move it around. Hey, Paul, how's all those white space changes going for you? It's like watching a crazy person code. There we go. I've always enjoyed this concept of being able to define an application based on the configuration here. I've always liked this, and I think this particular. So in Webpack world, I think Webpack's superior JavaScript tool for building modules because they have come up with this way of making the configuration file small and compact and meaningful. In the same way, I really think that Phalcon has done exactly the same thing of making project configuration small and configurable. I mean, the cool thing is that the way this file works is that I could still break this up into multiple files. I could have, if I had a complicated asset thingy that I wanted to inject at this point and like supersede how the system worked, I could functionally get that working here. And I could have that as a separate file, but there's no need for it to be a separate file. I mean, this file is under 100 lines at this point, including dependencies and and comments. So this is brilliant, being able to configure and set up the application structure in such a compact way. Very impressed with this. Okay. All right. So back to figuring out what we're going to have to implement next. So of course we come to the application. It's going to always deliver these components. Our index will always deliver this piece. Probably what's going to end up happening is we're going to have to move the uh, since I'm not going to be working in a reactive JavaScript application, we're going to need to have multiple views which are probably able to pass some arguments around to make sure that this is visible in more locations. So it's likely that it's a good idea that really this should be moved into our layout as well. And whether it's above or below the content, I'm not sure yet. But having this visible as part of the template means as we start changing pages, we want to produce pages that have additional URL parameters that might take us out of the index controller. If they're ever going to take us out of the index controller is probably the point. Thinking that's probably actually not going to happen. I'm probably not going to leave the index route. And if I do, I'm going to leave it for a show route, which is probably going to then just display not the calendar, but a particular view, or it's going to reinitialize the calendar in day view mode. So let's not jump to that conclusion just yet. So over to documentation world. So we haven't necessarily defined any callbacks for any of the features. The common ones are clicking on a day, clicking on drag and drop, first drag and drop the times around. I'm getting a little input that I can actually ditch the URL and tag registration. I'm assuming that probably the default behavior is to work from root. Let's explore that. I definitely don't need the tag part yet, because I have no intention of using tags. I kind of like having the base URL in here just because it's meaningful. But it would be nice to know if I didn't have it, what would happen. Yeah. I think ultimately I'm going to leave the URL in there because it does provide meaning. And even if it is just replacing the default behavior of the project, I think that like seeing it is kind of useful. So I'll leave that alone. But the tag one is definitely wasteful. I'm really going to have to go through and see if all the options that I can initialize inside of this file. So what I can do though is I do not need to actually create a URL object because by default the system already knows what that is. But am I really adding it? So if that's the default behavior and that's what I've created, have I really added anything? So the difference between this, which creates our arbitrary URL object and sets the base URL to the root, or using the internal one, if the internal one is there by default, then I would say that this should just be deleted. Because it does work either way. Yep, I'm going to go back. Hold on, I'm getting something. There's always a lovely little bit of time delay. Okay. Well, now that I like. That's meaningful. So in this case, instead of me, and I probably would end up just moving this down here. So it's about the response portion. Yeah, so without having to create an anonymous a closure around the DI so that I can then do some configuration, I can just say this is my base URL. Yeah, I like that a lot better. Cool. Cool. Love cool stuff. So much cool stuff. All right. Yeah. So the bigger steps going forward is obviously we want to integrate Google Calendar. So that is providing. So this is the thing that we're going to walk through in the future is getting into the developer console and setting up an API and token. And probably what's going to happen is I'm going to set one up. I'm going to have to make a false account and set one up, and then I'm going to hide it from everybody somehow. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I'm probably going to load .m somewhere through Composer, just so I don't have to share my API or have to reset it halfway through the stream if someone wants to co-opt it. The instructions, though, are pretty easy. I will probably make a video about where to get that because I think that this documentation has since been deprecated because the API console has been redesigned about 3 times. So I'm going to help you out with that one. But that's definitely coming. The big things we want to implement are drag and drop, event dragging, resizing, because we want to be able to allow someone to create an event by just like you would normal Google Calendar. Go to a day view or go to the week view, click on the spot in the calendar, and then go ahead and enter your event. The event enter syntax is going to require us to uh, build up the what was I saying? Is we're going to be able to design the view that we present to them for creating the calendar event. That part, in my mind, is, if I remember correctly, is not something that is uh, in here by default. I don't think they give you a default view. But let's see if we can get a demo running and see if that is what I think it is. So demo basic view, list view. Let's see, list view. I want to create a new event. This is always my. I'm pretty sure that the click on day or click on time, because of course not everything has been managed. The agenda view is not anywhere near as elegant, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. They probably have updated this a little bit. So the goal, though, is we need to provide a click space here, and I'm pretty sure that they do not have a UI for setting up the structure. So we're going to have to do some database work, figure out what our event model is going to look like, and then the step after that will be figuring out how we do logins and authentication for our users. Because ultimately the project's goal, now that we've gotten to this point, ultimately the project's goal is if we were working with a community and on average, people were reticent about, say, creating a Facebook account because they're children, um, or more than likely the opposite of children, and are afraid of it. So they don't want to register their events in a public place that people already can get to. We would want to provide them something that's almost the same, but is highly visible and something that we communicate to the community. So this is a project that's happening in my town, and so that's one of the reasons I was inspired to try to go this way for a demo. Is we want the public to be able to request an event, and we want to be there some kind of access control list almost when dealing with who has what right to do what. So of course, me, let's say Paul's the admin, I'm going to be able to create an event at any time, and it's just going to go in there. I'm going to be able to edit them too, and I can set them as published or unpublished. But Joe Nobody, who's never actually submitted an event before, should still be able to have the same activity, but will immediately be sending me an email and providing me some kind of opportunity to contact them and or create an account for them. So eventually the point is you'll have a circle of trust, a series of moderators for the community that will be able to either add the event as a proxy or be able to authorize / edit the event. Of course, like if you can't get someone to use Facebook to create an event or Meetup or something like that, what is the likelihood that you're going to get them to use this? Hey, that's not my part of the project. I'm not the foot traffic, the guy on the street part. I'm just the guy who wants to help them figure out where they can store that data. So I'm not gonna get too uppity about it. So I think if anything, let's see, we have a little bit of time, maybe a little bit of time. What might be fun is just to handle maybe a date click event, and I don't want to touch the database yet because I know that that's really the next kind of like big possible time sink. I mean, admittedly, that's all configured here, but the first thing I'm going to look at is, do we do migrations in Phalcon? Let's look that up. Ooh, it's auto-completed. It's looking positive. Let's see how migrations work. If migrations are kind of cut dry, Phalcon Developers Tools. I've heard of these. So this is something that we have to install. I like this idea that the developer tool is not part of the actual framework itself. That's actually a really smart idea. I'm going to keep saying that, I think. A lot of stuff in here. Really smart ideas. Just well thought out I know some of this is probably a side effect of this being a C extension. You've compiled as a C extension. You don't really have access to these other tools. But let's see. I keep hearing about this Invo thing. Find out what that is eventually. Let's see what a migration looks like. Now let's assume that this is possibly, yeah, it's probably up to date. So we have a change table syntax, it looks like. Magic method, morph table. Magic comes in, it recognizes the changes needed to be synchronized to synchronize the actual table in the database with the description given. I wonder what that means. Does that mean it looks at the table DDL and then sees that something needs a change, then uses that information to create the table change statement? Is that what they mean? It recognizes the changes. It seems almost like it's too, like maybe it says, okay, I already have this index, so I won't recreate it. Recognizing changes sounds complicated and risky. So I think more of my thought is it sounds risky, too clever for it to work. That needs some investigation. Okay, so anyways, migration. So we have to give a reasonably sized amount of properties, it looks like. I wonder which one of these are default by convention. Well, I'm going to say this. So recently, so obviously I do Rails most of the time, and I tend to like their migration syntax because it's very terse. Laravel syntax, I think, is unfortunately trying to make PHP look like that, and PHP doesn't do that well. Like, PHP doesn't look like other things. PHP is its own thing. So this being a bunch of hashes or maps, dictionaries, for defining what these look like, actually feel a little bit more orthogonal, and it's really very readable. I have to admit, I like that. I kind of like that I can define specific properties about size and scale. Like Rails is very much like we don't want you ever looking at the database ever. Don't bother. Oh, okay. Optional. No, so we'll have to provide a type. And what else is there? Writing migrations. Okay. Well, easy enough. Self-connection insert. So this is a data migration. It's nice to see someone with an example of a data migration. Migrations do not have to solely be about state change and DDL. It can be absolutely fixed upgrades. Migrations are there to promote a flow of data from where the project started to where it ended. And generally, if you got 15 people all working on the same thing, they probably have the same stuff that needs to be updated. So that's cool. Wish these windows were a little longer. Let's count from, so okay, version 1.06. Okay, so that's that. Schema dumping in the same view. Writing migrations, running migrations. So all the options are, so I can configure the migrations directory elsewhere, which is nice, but I don't know why I would. Default all. Interesting. I'm extremely excited to see that this already has migrations. In my old days, I picked up Grails maybe like 2 years ago, and I have to admit I was very excited about using a terse language that was built upon the JVM. And I know I've said before that Java makes a terrible language for the web, but I think abstractions on that language can be very meaningful. So my hope was it would work, but their migration process was an enormous joke. Like, they knew they needed it, but didn't bother actually making it work. That said, it did remind me a little bit of this. And it did have some discussion about the fact that it was like magically able to figure things out, but migrations ran in groups, which was dumb. And I think the bigger issue is how do I keep track of what is my current migration state? Does it keep that in the database? Because that I always see as an enormous weakness. But there is a lovely video about this. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that on the stack. How do I get this out of here? I want just a link. Just there. I just want that. Something for tomorrow. So let's go stick this in a box so that I can watch that later. Yes, and you're going to start auto playing. Okay. So next time will be migrations. We will have so that will create our schema, and then we'll register our click event and our base template for storing an event. Something very trivial, just start time, end time. So we'll probably load Composer at that point so that we can include Carbon, so we can deal with our dates in the most holistic way possible. And I think that's that. So I got some word that maybe the audio was a little bit quiet. That I can absolutely explain as I don't have any of my normal microphones today. We did a video project this morning, and my microphones got co-opted, and now I'm down to a Bluetooth headset, which admittedly I'm doing my best with, but I wouldn't be surprised if the audio isn't exceptional. So my apologies in regards to that. Expect the next one to be a little bit more clear. But thanks for participating. And at worst, I will be resuming this next week. I'll be pushing this code right now again, so you can go ahead and look through it. And I'm going to write up a little bit of documentation in the README about the next steps and kind of a short plan for when things are going to get done. And by all means, leave any other questions or ideas for things I could add to this in the comments. And much appreciated. Have a good evening.